Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Ninja in Jujutsu Kaisen. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name in the description below. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 81, Hanami and Dagon's Transformation. After the explosion, Jogo and the other two stared at the broken wooden ball with a hole in it. However, when the smoke and dust cleared, the wooden ball was empty. Where is he? Impossible. He clearly hid inside the wooden ball at the last moment. At this moment, not only were Jogo and the others confused, but the students and teachers, who were watching the battle from a distance, were also stunned. Mei-sensei, where is Kazuma? Yeah, Kazuma clearly hid in the wooden ball just now. For a moment, everyone turned their eyes to Mei. Because she, who can control crows, must be able to see more clearly than anyone else. Shoo! Mei placed her index finger on her red lips and closed her beautiful eyes. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes and said with a smile, "Look at the top of your head." Upon hearing this, everyone looked up at the sky and their pupils suddenly shrank. It was as if they had seen an extremely shocking scene. At this moment, Jogo and the other two also felt something strange above their heads. A dazzling light pierced their brows and caused them to feel a dull pain. When they looked up, they were completely dumbfounded. Kazuma had appeared above them without them knowing, but that wasn't the shocking part. The real issue was, he was holding a huge ball in his palm. It was so huge that it almost covered half the sky. The Rasengan was so big that it nearly occupied their entire field of vision. Kazuma smiled and said, "I'll treat you to some meatballs." Then, he slightly bent his body, and swung the Rasengan in his left hand down like a slam dunk. Boom! Jogo and the other two, who had no time to escape, could only mobilize their cursed energy in front of them to resist. But in front of the huge Rasengan, the three powerful disaster curses could only be reduced to tiny ants. Boom! As the Rasengan fell like a missile, it was as if the whole world had gone silent. The earth shook, and the sky trembled. The huge roar made people's ears ring. An extremely dazzling light flashed by, causing the students, who were watching from afar, to raise their hands to cover their eyes. The fierce gust of wind made it almost impossible for everyone to stand steadily. The most unlucky one was Momo, who was flying in the sky. In the aftermath, she, who was riding on her magic broom, was like a fallen leaf in the wind, spinning uncontrollably. The people below stood there in a daze, motionless, like petrified statues. After a long moment, everyone took a deep breath, feeling their brains become heavy and dizzy. Mai suddenly thought of something, and looked at Yuji in shock. She said in disbelief, "Don't tell me this is the same move you used before?" In fact, she already had the answer in her heart but just couldn't believe it at the moment. Although the ball Yuji had previously shot was red, the essence of the two was the same, both made by compressing cursed energy. Before, the ball Yuji made were only about the size of a basketball. But the Rasengan used by Kazuma would probably have to be calculated using a basketball court. What a monster! Yuji sighed and said weakly, "Yes, this move is called Rasengan, and everyone should know the principle." Yuji was a little shocked at this moment. He scratched his ears and cheeks and said, "Why is mine so small? But Kazuma's is so big? It's really heartbreaking." Hearing this, everyone almost choked and rolled their eyes at Yuji. You'd better be talking about the Rasengan. However, from this perspective, how terrifying is Kazuma's control over cursed energy? How did he create such a big Rasengan in such a short time? Incredible control. Is this something a human can do? Even if the opponent was a special grade cursed spirit, if they took this attack head-on, they would probably be seriously injured, right? At this moment, Kazuma stood high in the sky, looking at the massive crater below, nodding with satisfaction. This is the benefit of having a huge chakra reserve. If it were him before he had transplanted Hashirama's cells, there was no way he could have created this huge Rasengan in such a short time. The moment he was wrapped in the wooden ball, he had entered the Kamui dimension to make the Rasengan. When the Rasengan was nearly complete, he appeared above Jogo and the other two. With the help of the Kamui dimension, he could also use many unexpected combination skills. Kazuma hoped that these disaster curses weren't too weak after all, the mission wasn't over yet. He looked down and said calmly, "Is this the so-called disaster curses that stand above special grade curses? Looks like it's nothing more than that. You just took one hit and laid down?" At the bottom of the crater, Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon stood up with difficulty, all suffering considerable injuries. If the three of them hadn't joined forces to cast a defensive technique at the last moment, they would have been severely injured. At this moment, Hanami had already torn off the white cloth wrapped around his arms. The dark brown arm radiated an immeasurable cursed energy, and the enchanting blood-red flower bud on his shoulder had fully bloomed, emitting a strange energy. This was his complete form. Not only Hanami, but Dagon had also undergone earth-shaking changes. From his previous cursed fetus form, he had evolved into a complete form with an octopus head and a humanoid body. Seeing this, Kazuma raised his eyebrows slightly. Dagon actually got out of his cursed fetus state ahead of time? In the original story, Dagon had completed his transformation after devouring countless humans during the Shibuya incident. Did Kenjaku give him some kind of supplement? Just as Kazuma was thinking, Hanami suddenly became enraged. "You actually destroyed so much plants at once. You deserve to die." Hanami was so angry that he couldn't speak clearly. Boom! Behind him, a massive, eerie flower bud suddenly grew. The bud exploded open, revealing countless strange seeds with sharp teeth inside. The shrieking and wailing sound was so piercing that it made everyone present shudder. Chapter 82, Overwhelming Would Release. Devour him. Countless strange seeds burst out from the stamens, instantly covering Kazuma in the air. In this situation, all of Kazuma's escape routes were blocked, there was no way out. Soon, Kazuma's pupils widened. His eyes were filled with unwillingness as his entire body became engulfed by cursed seeds. The seeds took root and sprouted within him, devouring his flesh and blood. In mere moments, Kazuma could no longer be considered a human. Hanami's sudden and strange attack shifted the tide of battle in an instant. Nobara clenched her hammer tightly and stared at the sky. She asked, Kazuma, he's not dead, right?" Gakaganji spoke in a deep voice, "You too. Go save Kazuma quickly, maybe there's still time. Leave the students to me." Everyone nodded. The opponent's cursed technique was too strange. Without prior knowledge, it was impossible to guard against. And Kazuma's genjutsu was useless in this situation. Yuji spoke anxiously, "What about letting Tadu use Boogie Woogie? He can clap his hands and switch with Kazuma?" Tadu's mouth twitched violently as he feigned disappointment. "Hey! I'm your best friend. What would I do if I switched places with him?" That said, his hands were already preparing to move. Clearly, he wasn't the type to back down. Kazuma's role was far greater than his own. Maybe he wouldn't have cared about Kazuma's fate before. But he had introduced a best friend to him. Just as he was about to clap his hands, Meimei interrupted, "Hey, it's fine if Kyoto's students are worrying, but why are you two panicking, Yuji, Nobara? Have you forgotten the substitution technique Kazuma used when he fought Sukuna before? Those cursed seeds are fast, but even if it were me, I'd have time to react." "Do you really think Kazuma couldn't?" Despite her calm tone, Meimei's heart was anything but steady. She wasn't completely sure if Kazuma had managed to substitute himself in time. Hearing this, Yuji and Nobara slapped their heads, suddenly remembering, and their worry eased slightly. But the Kyoto students were confused. Substitution technique? What kind of ability was that? They had never heard of it before, but it sounded useful. Was Kazuma pulling off something crazy again? Jogo looked at Kazuma, who was now completely parasitized and drained by the cursed seeds, and laughed wildly like never before. So what if he is powerful? No matter how strong he is, he's still just a human. But the very next moment, he regretted it. Kazuma, who had been immobilized in midair, suddenly vanished in a puff of white smoke. A flood of bad memories rushed into Jogo's mind. Substitution technique? Hanami, retreat immediately. Sorry, this time it's a shadow clone. A calm voice whispered near his ear. Jogo's face twisted in horror. He turned around just in time to see a glimmer of light. Hanami reacted quickly, slamming both hands to the ground. Boom! Massive, towering trees erupted from the earth like coiling pythons. At that moment, Kazuma's voice rang out again. Would release, nativity of a world of trees. This is one of the legendary techniques of the god of shinobi, Senju Hashirama. Whether in attack, defense, or crowd control, it is unparalleled. It is an all-encompassing technique, perfect in every aspect. Boom! Twisted, monstrous trees surged forward like living creatures. Under Kazuma's control, they continued to expand and spread, endlessly growing. Soon, a massive green canopy had formed behind him, blotting out the sun. Even the barrier set up by Kenjaku was about to be pierced. Kazuma stood in the center of this tree world, his arms crossed. The trees Hanami had summoned before? They had been swallowed entirely by the endless green tide. Not even a trace of them remained. In this ocean of trees, Kazuma was the absolute master. Natural disasters, witness the true power of nature. His voice was calm, yet it echoed through the battlefield like an incantation. Roar! The colossal trees roared like dragons. Hanami, escape! Quickly! Jogo's face contorted in terror as he shouted. But in the next instant, he realized how foolish those words were. The forest of destruction surged forth like a relentless tidal wave. The dense, endless greenery engulfed them instantly. There was nowhere to run. How is this possible? How can he control plants just like Hanami? And more than that, the sheer quantity, the power, the precision, it was on an entirely different level. This wasn't just a natural disaster. This was a force beyond nature itself. The students watching from afar stood frozen, their eyes wide, their mouths hanging open. Their minds were blank, overwhelmed by sheer horror. This is the new cursed technique Kazuma created? After a long silence, Gakagenji turned his head stiffly to look at Yutahime and Mei-Mei. Mei-Mei ignored him. Her long hair covered her face, making it impossible to tell her expression. Only the slight tremble of her lips revealed the unease she felt. Yutahime's delicate face turned pale with shock. She forced an awkward smile at Gakagenji and said, I think so? Creating a cursed technique? That was just an excuse she, Mei-Mei, and Shoko had made up for Kazuma. But who could have imagined that Kazuma would really do that? Not only did he create a new cursed technique. It was on this level? Could this even be considered a cursed technique anymore? It wasn't just a cursed technique, it was a force of nature. Hearing this, Gakagenji nearly dropped his electric guitar. He had heard rumors that Kazuma was skilled at developing strange new curse techniques, a true inventor of abilities. But now, he had witnessed it firsthand. In his 70-plus years of life, he had never seen anything so overwhelming. Never. Now, he finally understood why the higher-ups were so terrified of Kazuma. If nothing unexpected happens, Kazuma will become the second Gojo Satoru. Chapter 83, Maximum, Meteorite. But how much cursed energy is required to do this? In other words, how much cursed energy is contained in Kazuma's body? It's probably more than Yuta's, right? As for Yuji and the others in the back, they were already speechless. Before, the three disaster curses were chasing and killing them, but now it was Kazuma alone who was chasing and fighting the disaster curses. Kazuma's strength was once again refreshed in their hearts. In the ocean of trees, Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon were trying their best to avoid the attacks of wood release. If they weren't careful, they would be struck by the extremely hard vines. During this process, they had tried to attack and destroy the attacking giant trees. But there were too many to finish. At this moment, Kazuma, within the tree world, raised his hands again and formed a seal. Wood release, cutting technique. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, several sharp wooden stakes shot out from the sea of wood, heading straight for Hanami. Although Kazuma was enjoying testing out wood release, he knew that he must not get too carried away and forget the system's mission. The wooden stakes summoned by the cutting technique were extremely fast, small in size, and camouflaged within the sea of wood. Even if Hanami noticed them at the last moment, his body was unable to react in time. Ah! A miserable cry followed. Hanami had been nailed to the ground by dozens of sharp wooden stakes. Purple blood stained the earth as black cursed energy continued to seep from his body. Although he struggled hard, enduring the severe pain, he was unable to break free for a while. Even at this moment, Hanami was still furious. Why could a human control plants? And why was he so much stronger than him? Seeing this, Jogo panicked. Hanami! He screamed, and terrifying flames ignited all over his body. Magma surged out of the miniature Mount Fuji above his head. The twisted giant tree that was about to touch him burned and recoiled slightly on its own. Upon seeing this, Dagon exhaled a bubble barrier made of water to cover Hanami. Seeing Hanami's miserable state, the volcano above Jogo's head completely erupted. A terrifying heat spread outward. From the mouth of the volcano above his head, swarms of ember insects burst forth. These insects flew towards the countless twisted giant trees, sacrificing themselves like a suicide squad. Boom! Although the insects were small, the explosion they produced upon impact was massive. As dense swarms of ember insects detonated one after another. For a moment, the sea of wood, formed by the twisted giant trees, was temporarily halted in its advance. Jogo's cloak fluttered wildly. HR turned to Hanami, whose face was twisted in pain, and spoke hoarsely, "Hanami, forgive me for what I must do next. The plants in this forest may burn to ashes, but that damned Kazuma will pay the price for it." After saying this, the blackened ground beneath Jogo's feet suddenly turned red-hot, scorching his soles. Bang! He raised his leg and stomped hard onto the earth. The ground split open as countless streams of magma surged out. The terrifying lava instantly melted everything in its path, consuming the landscape in a fiery inferno. Among the 4 disaster curses, Hanami was the closest to Jogo. Seeing him in such agony, Jogo's rage exploded. Like a fuse, this fury ignited an unbreakable resolve in his heart. He intended to burn everything, transforming into a demon within the flames of his wrath. Jogo spread his legs, lowering his stance until he was almost touching the ground. Maximum, meteorite. As his hoarse and furious voice fell, a tremendous burst of cursed energy erupted from his body. The magma beneath his feet, as if responding to its master's call, shot up instantly, forming a sea of fire that blazed 100 meters into the sky. At the same time, under Jogo's control, the massive sea of fire compressed into a gigantic fireball. It was like Mars crashing into the earth. Kazuma, standing within the tree world, raised an eyebrow slightly, sighing inwardly. Is there some hidden bond between Jogo and Hanami? Seeing Hanami injured actually made Jogo unleash such immense power. Maximum, meteorite, was unexpectedly making an early debut. This was the same full-force attack Jogo had used against Sukuna during the Shibuya incident. The fireball behind Jogo continued to grow larger. Even from hundreds of meters away, its terrifying heat could be felt. Watching the scene unfold, Kazuma stepped out of the tree world and said with a faint smile, "Playing with fire? Who doesn't know how to use fire release these days?" Kazuma waved his hand, dismissing the vast sea of wood. Seeing this, the students were puzzled. Nobara exclaimed in confusion, "Why did Kazuma remove the curse technique controlling the plants?" Gakagenji said, "I guess it's probably because he's running low on cursed energy. The amount of cursed energy required to sustain such large-scale trees should be terrifying. It's already amazing that he lasted this long." Although Gakagenji's words sounded harsh, they made sense. Kazuma was still human, after all. No matter how much cursed energy he possessed, it wasn't infinite. If he continued maintaining that cursed technique, he'd be drained in no time. Yutaheim pulled her clothes tighter and said, "But he doesn't seem panicked at all." That volcano curse looks furious. The fireball behind him is nearly as large as the huge Rasengan that Kazuma had created before. As soon as those words fell, everyone tensed up. Even from such a distance, they could feel the scorching heat. Sweat was already forming on their foreheads. Its power was unimaginable. At this moment, Mei suddenly stepped forward. She waved her hand to conjure a barrier, blocking the incoming heat waves. Miwa hid behind Mai and whispered gratefully, Mei-sensei is really thoughtful. I'm afraid half of this forest will be reduced to ashes by that volcano curse's next attack. This battle is absolutely terrifying. We'll definitely be caught in the crossfire later. Chapter 84, Fire vs. Fire. Mei was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled and said, "Eh? You guessed wrong, Miwa-san. This barrier is set up for the fire that Kazuma is about to use." She had not forgotten the fire Kazuma had used at the abandoned construction site. At that time, even while standing far behind him, her skin stung from the intense heat. And Shoko was so affected that tears welled up in her eyes. Given Kazuma's personality, there was a high probability that he would use the same moves as his opponent to completely overpower them this time. What? Kazuma can also use fire? Everyone felt dizzy. Just how many curse techniques did this guy know? Hadn't Principal Gakaganji said that Kazuma didn't have much cursed energy left? Even if he used fire, could he suppress the massive fireball of that cursed spirit? Gakaganji analyzed in a deep voice, if Kazuma can control the water element, his chances of winning will be higher. After all, water conquers fire. Kazuma stood atop the giant tree, waiting for Jogo to unleash his ultimate move. Jogo's expression was ferocious. Even with his eyes tightly shut, the boundless rage radiating from him was palpable. Don't even think about leaving your ashes behind. As the final word fell, the massive fireball in the air instantly locked onto Kazuma and shot toward him at high speed. The fireball was enormous, like a falling meteor. Kazuma had no intention of dodging. He strode forward and leaped high into the air. A huge surge of chakra flowed into his throat. Kazuma's cheeks bulged as he brought his hands together in front of his chest. Fire release, great fire annihilation. Boom! A torrent of flames erupted from his mouth, forming a towering volcano of fire in an instant. The sky burned red, and the temperature of Kazuma's flames rivaled that of Jogo's fireball. The system mission stated having an overwhelming victory, so Kazuma didn't hold back. Chakra surged into his throat, as if it were limitless. As if that wasn't enough, his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan also spun. Amaterasu. Black flames flickered amidst the red fire, standing out ominously. Did Amaterasu count as fire release too? But soon, Kazuma realized that Amaterasu was unnecessary. The moment his sea of fire clashed with Jogo's fireball, a violent sizzling sound erupted. At first, the two flames were evenly matched, but over time, Jogo's fireball was gradually devoured by Kazuma's sea of fire, shrinking bit by bit. Though their raw power was nearly equal, Kazuma's endurance was far superior. The once dense forest was now barren. The earth was scorched black, smoldering with thick white smoke. Amaterasu's black flames moved swiftly, engulfing Jogo before he could react. Jogo was horrified. He had no time to process the flames spewing from Kazuma. Instead, he frantically leapt around, channeling his cursed energy in a desperate attempt to douse the black flames. Seeing this, Kazuma smirked and thought to himself, "This is a flame said to be unquenchable. It will not die out until its target is reduced to ashes. If you can put it out, I'll admit defeat." Amaterasu, like the infernal flames of the underworld, continued to spread despite Jogo's struggle. Jogo screamed in agony, "Dagon! Throw water on me!" Hearing this, Dagon immediately raised his hands and summoned two powerful jets of water, drenching Jogo. But no matter how much water poured over him, the black flames remained. Jogo's shock and fury intensified. A chilling sense of death crept into his mind. What was this cursed flame? His own cursed energy couldn't erase it. Even Dagon's water couldn't extinguish it. The black flames crept further, torturing Jogo mercilessly. This pain was unlike any ordinary fire, it burned deep into his very soul. If this continues, he will die. Dagon! Cut below Jogo's neck now. Before it's too late. Nearby, Hanami, still riddled with wounds, had just pulled the wooden stakes from his body. Seeing the situation, he shouted, "There's no time to put it out. The only option is amputation. Otherwise, if that strange black flame reaches his head, Jogo is finished." Dagon nodded. He condensed an ultra-sharp blade of water and slashed toward Jogo's neck. Swish! Jogo's head separated from his body and his vision spun. Hanami caught Jogo's head in his palm, lifted it, and muttered darkly, "Mahito should be almost here. Let's prepare to retreat." Jogo, now just ahead, sighed deeply. Is Kazuma my nemesis? Every time I fight him, I end up like this. Dagon, use your domain. Take us away. The three of us can't kill him. Despite his reluctance, Jogo had to admit it. Dagon nodded, and crouched slightly. He pressed his hands to the ground, and spoke in a low voice. Domain expansion, horizon of the captivating Skanda. Death swarm. Boom! As Dagon's domain unfolded, the ground split open beneath them. A violent ocean surged from the cracks, churning with towering waves. Countless ancient, bloodthirsty fish leapt from the water, their gaping jaws snapping toward Kazuma. And amidst the chaos, Dagon seized the moment, using the waves to carry Jogo and Hanami away. Chapter 85, Hollow Purple's Debut. Kazuma was shocked when he saw this and immediately formed two hand seals to block their retreat. Water release, water formation wall. Water release, exploding water colliding wave. Dagon is a cursed spirit born out of fear of the ocean. Therefore, although his domain's damage is not the highest, its range is very large. The most important thing is that Kazuma's mission has not been completed yet. How can he let them go? Jogo and the other two curses looked at the vast ocean summoned by Kazuma in disbelief and were completely dumbfounded. How can this guy control water, fire, and wood? Is there still justice? Is there still law? Asshole. Who is the natural disaster? However, at this moment, even more despair came. Snap! The crisp sound of glass breaking was heard. Everyone looked upwards. The barrier was broken. Gojo was hanging upside down in the air, with a smile on his face. He slowly raised his hand and pointed at the three curses below him. Looking at Gojo, Jogo, and the other two felt despair. Are they really going to die here? At this moment, a cheerful child's voice sounded behind them. Jogo, Hanami, Dagon, now that I have the stuff, I'm here to save you. Ha ha ha. They saw that Mahito had turned into a child at this moment. An excited smile appeared on his face, and he was running towards this side. There were two people chasing after him, Nanami and Yaga. Satoru. Don't let them go. He has stolen Sukuna's finger. Yaga shouted toward Gojo, who was high in the sky. Really? That's going to have to be a little rough. Gojo, floating upside down in the sky, took off his blindfold, revealing his pale blue six eyes. He clasped his hands together and said calmly. Cursed technique amplification, blue. Cursed technique reversal, red. As he finished speaking, two red and blue spheres filled with manic energy appeared behind him and began to squeeze and merge with each other. Take the amplified and the reversal, then smash together those two different expressions of infinity to create and push out imaginary mass. Imaginary technique, hollow purple. A purple sphere emitting terrifying pressure, enough to destroy everything, condensed in front of Gojo. Boom! The sphere burst out, swallowing everything in its path. Mahito, who had sneaked into the range of Dagon's domain, smiled inside. It's so powerful that even from such a distance, it can make every cell in my body tremble uncontrollably. However, I don't want to die here. It is a pity to waste all the man-made cursed spirits I have accumulated. He sighed and pulled out a handful of shrunken artificial cursed spirits from his pocket. polymorphic soul isomer. This is a technique he had extended from soul multiplicity. As long as two or more souls are fused together, the strength of the souls will increase instantly, and a powerful artificial cursed spirit can be forcibly pieced together. The form can naturally be decided by him. Mahito threw the shrunken man-made cursed spirit into the air and then suddenly clapped his hands. Fused together. After the artificial cursed spirit was forcibly squeezed and fused, it turned into a huge wall of flesh and blood. Mahito looked at Jogo and the other two and said, "Hey! Help me, this won't stop Gojo's killer move." Boom! The wall of flesh and blood was annihilated in an instant when it came into contact with hollow purple. Hanami quickly created a giant wooden shield, and Dagon gathered all the seawater in the area to form a water shield. But despite this, facing purple, they still had no resistance. Boom! As the explosion ended, the ground was devastated and almost split in half. A huge crack appeared before their eyes, and the place where the four curses were located was completely annihilated, without even ash left. Mei sighed and said, "Tisk, aren't these two guys too monstrous? Their techniques are so out of the ordinary." Yaga asked in a low voice, "Are they dead?" Gojo used his 6 eyes to stare at the place where the disaster curses had just been. Soon after, he slowly shook his head and said, "They escaped. That guy with the stitched face seems to be a little special. He seems to be very hard to kill." Gojo touched his chin and muttered to himself. He didn't seem to care about the consequences of Mahito and the others running away with Sukuna's finger. Hearing this, Yaga furiously said, "What? They just ran away? You almost destroyed this forest, and you still couldn't save the people." Gojo immediately retorted, "Hey! Yaga, stop accusing me. I just got here not long ago." Yaga said, "Who else could it be if not you? Do others have the ability to destroy the forest like this?" Gojo looked at Kazuma in the distance with a smile in his eyes and said, "You will have to ask Kazuma about this question." Kazuma? Yaga and Nanami both looked at Kazuma. In the distance, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, their tense nerves finally relaxing. It's finally over. What kind of sister exchange event is this? It's clearly an exchange event between special grade sorcerers and disaster curses. Yuji and the others came to their senses. Fear and helplessness appeared on their faces. Mei looked at Gakuganji, who had a dull look on his face, and said proudly, "Principal Gakuganji, didn't you just say that Kazuma's cursed energy was running low? But what about that sea of fire? And that terrifying tsunami?" The corners of Gakuganji's eyes twitched slightly, and for a moment, he didn't know how to answer. He himself was still extremely puzzled. From the moment Kazuma started fighting the 3 cursed spirits, he never stopped using super large-scale moves. If possible, he even wanted to dissect Kazuma's body to study what was so unique about it. This kid has an almost endless supply of cursed energy. Yuji suddenly remembered something and asked, "By the way, Kazuma, what's going on with your black flame? Is this another new cursed technique of yours?" Chapter 86, A Traitor? Everyone turned their eyes to Kazuma, except for Yutaheim, whose forehead was wrinkled. Although they were shocked by the boundless sea of fire, they were most curious about the strange black flame that they had never seen before. No matter what method was used, the curses could not extinguish it at all, and in the end, he was forced to amputate his limbs to survive. Kazuma made up a story and said, that's a variant of a cursed technique related to flames. You can think of it as a flame that never goes out. Once infected, there is no other way than to amputate the affected part decisively." Hiss. Everyone gasped. A flame that never goes out? Isn't that too far-fetched? Kazuma wouldn't use the black flames to burn his own people, would he? Yutaheim, who was standing by, said, "You used such a dangerous flame to light Shoko's cigarette last time? You even said it's an ordinary flame, just with a special color?" Yutaheim's heart skipped a beat when she heard the words "never extinguishes." Recalling the scene of that day, she couldn't help but feel scared. What if Kazuma's move had gone awry? What would Shoko do then? Everyone was shocked again. Did they hear that correctly? Kazuma had used this to light Shoko's cigarette? One dares to do it and the other dares to take it. However, Shoko should not have known about this. Otherwise, she might have to quit smoking on the spot. What never goes out? What about Shoko? Yaga and Gojo came over and looked at Kazuma with scrutiny. Did he do something to offend Shoko? But looking at Mei's smiling face, she doesn't seem to be jealous, right? Half an hour later. Everyone gathered together to understand the whole story. Yaga said, that's basically what happened. The other party's goal this time was not to kill the students, but to attract attention and steal Sukuna's finger. These disaster curses are fundamentally different from other special-grade cursed spirits. Their intelligence is the same as that of humans, or even higher. But how did they know the location of Sukuna's finger? You mean, there might be a traitor inside Jujutsu High? Gojo frowned slightly and asked in confusion. At this moment, he had snatched Momo's magic broom and was flying around at a low altitude. Momo was so annoyed that she took the opportunity to run to Kazuma and act coquettishly. But she was quickly silenced by a look from Mei. Looking at her pretending to be so pitiful, Kazuma couldn't help but sigh. What a clever little Lolita. Yaga said solemnly, that's right. Although it's just a guess, it's highly likely that this is the case. Next, I'll have to trouble Yutaheim to lead the students to conduct an investigation. Yutaheim nodded, but she was still a little reluctant to believe that there was a traitor. It's possible to collude with a curse user, but how could someone collude with a cursed spirit? For a moment, everyone fell silent. Jujutsu High has always been united, and there has never been a traitor. Kazuma already had the answer in his mind. One of them was a senior executive above the level of principal. The other was responsible for leaking information to the higher-ups. Thinking of this, Kazuma turned his gaze towards Mekamaru. When Mekamaru saw Kazuma suddenly looking at him, his heart skipped a beat in the secret room. But he soon realized that this was probably just a coincidence. So, Mekamaru nodded calmly towards Kazuma. Kazuma just glanced at him and then looked away. Having read the original story, he naturally knew everything. Mekamaru, strictly speaking, is not a traitor. He just wanted to use Mahito's idol transfiguration to completely heal himself. He also has a heavenly restriction like Maki, but his situation is completely opposite to that of Maki. His cursed energy can almost cover the entire country. He has a wide range of techniques and a cursed energy output that far exceeds his own strength. But the price is... his lower body is completely paralyzed from the waist down, and his skin is even more fragile than that of a newborn baby. Even a faint ray of sunlight can easily burn him. Whether it is Maki or Mekamaru, the lucky ones, they all hate the god's gift. After discovering Mahito and Kenjaku's Shibuya plan, Mekamaru had once tried to spread the news. But in the end, despite giving it everything, he still failed. Just as Kazuma was thinking about how to deal with this matter, Gojo suddenly shouted, Kazuma is fine. Although his identity, origin, and ability are unknown. Gojo couldn't continue talking at this point. What happened to Kazuma being doubt-free? Why are there so many mysteries? Yaga shouted angrily, what are you yelling about? Did I say Kazuma was a traitor? If he hadn't fought the 3 disaster curses alone this time, the consequences for the students would have been disastrous. You have a chance of being a traitor, but there's no way Kazuma is the traitor. Everyone. Yuji said, I also think it's impossible for Kazuma to be the traitor. Those cursed spirits must hate Kazuma to death by now. Especially that volcano head curse. The way he looked at Kazuma seemed like he wanted to tear him into pieces. Kazuma was speechless. Why did they suddenly change the topic to him? However, seeing this scene, he couldn't help but feel a little emotional. The sister exchange event should be the one where the most people had gathered, right? After the Shibuya incident, people died left, right and center. Nobara was in a vulnerable state, and Nanami was blown to pieces by Mahito's idol transfiguration. At night, in the dormitory, Kazuma turned on the system panel. Congratulations to the host for completing the task, rewards are being distributed. Hearing this voice, Kazuma showed joy on his face and immediately sat up straight. However, the next second, the cold mechanical sound rang out again. The Rinnegan has been issued. Please transplant it yourself. Chapter 87, Rinnegan. Ha! Kazuma looked at the Rinnegan that had suddenly appeared in his hand and fell into deep thought. Is this the final form of the Sharingan, the Rinnegan that is said to be able to control life and death? Under the night sky, the Rinnegan emitted a faint purple light. But the system wants him to transplant it himself? Pick his eyes off and put the Rinnegan back in an empty eye socket? This kind of operation is not uncommon in Naruto. After all, the Sharingan is no different from a USB flash drive, and it can easily be inserted whenever or wherever. But it's still a little hard to do it himself. Ha! Taking a deep breath, Kazuma covered his fingers with a layer of gentle chakra. Then, he slowly moved them towards his left eye. Just as the Rinnegan and the eternal Mangekyo of the left eye approached each other. Suddenly, a suction force came from deep within his eyes. Then, the Rinnegan seemed to have encountered a magnet that could attract it and merged into his left eye on its own. This process only took a few seconds and there was no pain at all. Kazuma just had a slight cold and uncomfortable feeling. Kazuma slowly stood up and opened his eyes. He stood in front of the mirror. His right eye was scarlet and charming, but his left eye had taken on a deep purple color. He discovered that he could switch back and forth between the eternal Mangekyo and the Rinnegan at will. Thankfully, the system has a conscience. He silently gave the system a good review in his heart. In this way, while possessing the power of Kamui, he can also use the powerful moves of the Rinnegan. For example, Shinra Tensei, Shibaku Tensei, Bansho Tenin, and other super ninjutsu. After thinking about all this, Kazuma couldn't calm down. Before, he could only envy this ability, but now he can actually use it himself. This time, after secretly stealing Sukuna's fingers, Mahito actually ran back to save Jogo and the other two. It's just that the so-called 4 disaster curses were just pawns of Geto from beginning to end. Once they loses their value, they can be discarded at any time. Next, all Kazuma has to do is wait quietly for the Shibuya incident to happen. By the way, now he has the Rinnegan. During the Shibuya incident, should he follow Pain's example? Let the likes of Mahito and the others feel pain? Thinking of this, Kazuma became more excited, and he decided to go to Mei tonight to discuss biology. Whoosh! A vortex appeared and Kazuma disappeared. At the same time, in a golden beach. It was sunny and the scenery was as beautiful as a dream. Although Dagon has escaped from the cursed fetus form, he still liked to swim in the sea. Mahito, Kenjaku, Jogo, and Hanami, who were sitting together, were absorbed in playing mahjong. Mahito played the useless little chicken and introduced it to his companions. This guy is our new partner, Haruta. This time, stealing Sukuna's finger took me a lot of shortcuts. He is a guy who only bullies the weak and fears the strong. Haruta smiled timidly. Although he was a crazy guy, facing these top tiers, he could only choose to be obedient. Jogo, who only had a head left, snorted coldly, obviously very unhappy with traitors like Haruta. Kenjaku suppressed his smile and jokingly said, "You were left with only one head twice. Should we say you are unlucky or lucky?" Jogo angrily said, "Humph. I strongly suggest leaving the prison realm for Kazuma." Kenjaku said, "Jogo, don't act on impulse." Jogi refuted, "I am acting on impulse? Just ask Hanami how monstrous that guy is. He can manipulate plants, fire, and water. The three of us are disaster curses, and the abilities we each control have been crushed by him alone. And that too, while using the superior version of our abilities. An ignorant person might think he is the disaster curse." Mahito raised his chin and said, "I object. It's better to leave the prison realm to Gojo. Don't ignore the hollow purple from before. We are all seriously injured now. It's frightening just thinking about it." Jogo said, "That sea of trees move was unavoidable. Use the prison realm on Kazuma. Mahito argued, Gojo is a bigger threat. Jogo said, don't forget the strange black flame that can't be extinguished. I almost died there. Mahito said, Gojo has infinity. There is no way to deal with it. Use the prison realm on Kazuma. On Gojo. For a while, the two argued back and forth. Kenjaku said, okay, don't let the new guy laugh at you. I have a clever way to deal with both of them at the same time during the Shibuya incident. Kenjaku raised two fingers and smiled gently. As Kenjaku finished speaking, Jogo and others turned their eyes to him. First of all, the prison realm must be left to Gojo. Hearing this, Jogo frowned, looking somewhat displeased, but he still patiently did not interrupt. Kenjaku then smiled and said, do you remember the special curtain we set up this time? Jogo's eyes lit up and he said, you mean, set up a curtain in Shibuya that doesn't restrict all sorcerers from coming and going freely, except Kazuma? If that's the case, it's indeed feasible. As long as Gojo and Kazuma are restrained, the rest won't be a problem. Besides, with Geto's mastery of barrier techniques, it is not difficult to do this. At this time, Mahito spoke up, but in this way, our plan will take longer. Gojo was able to break through the curtain in a short time, so Kazuma probably won't need too much time either. What if Kazuma breaks inside before we seal Gojo? Chapter 88. Kenjaku's plan for Kazuma. Kenjaku smiled and said, so, we have to work harder. 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside, how about that? I think this shouldn't be a big problem, right? 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Although doing this will consume a lot of cursed energy, at least Kazuma can be completely restricted this way. No matter how strong he is, it will be impossible for him to break inside in a short time. Unless he can teleport. However, this kind of thing should not be possible. Thinking of this, Jogo felt relieved and did not object again. Kenjaku said, the matter of prison realm has been settled. Next, let's talk about the information about Kazuma we have gained from this fight. This is very important. Although he didn't want to recall it, Jogo still told in detail. As far as we know, his abilities include controlling natural elements, genjutsu, and unextinguishable black flames. 2.5 minutes later. Jogo sighed. That's all we know for now. As for how many tricks he has yet to reveal, we don't know. But I think Kazuma's tricks should have been forced out. It's impossible that we can fly into the sky and summon meteorites to smash us to death, right? Jogo looked at everyone and spoke slowly. Kenjaku solemnly said, well, this guy knows a lot. No wonder you are so afraid of him, especially those super large-scale techniques. But with this information, we can make some corresponding targeted decisions. At this time, Mahito brought up an old box with a seal on it. When the cloth strips were torn off, Sukuna's fingers that were covered in wax and wrapped in old yellow sealing cloth strips were revealed. Mahito said, I'm very confused. Why would you go to so much trouble to steal these fingers? Didn't Jujutsu High keep Yuji just to use him as a vessel to devour Sukuna's finger? Even if we left it alone, it would be eaten sooner or later, right? Kenjaku's eyes flickered as he patiently explained, those high-ranking officials are more afraid of death than anyone else. When they cannot measure the strength of the vessel, they will not risk letting Yuji continue to devour them. So, we can't wait that long. Of course, except for that lunatic Gojo. That guy just acts according to his mood. Kenjaku said, let's go meet that old man who is a senior sorcerer, and that dishonest Mekamaru. He promised that if Mahito could cure his lower body, he would help in Shibuya. A few days later. In Jujutsu High, Kazuma had a few days of leisure. Every day, he only needed to teach the students of the 2 schools. In the evening, he would have a few drinking parties with Shoko and the others. How happy! But Kazuma knew that all this was just the calm before the storm. These days, Nobara has had her highlight moment. Just recently, combined with Yuji's Black Flash, she killed Eso and Kechizu. These days, she has been shouting about her achievements in everyone's ears every day. What are you standing there for? Give way to the hero. Or something like that. Yuji also foolishly followed behind to cheer and recount their heroic achievements. Little did he know that he had killed his two brothers. Megumi has also made great progress. Just like in the original work, he successfully awakened his own domain, Chimera Shadow Garden. Although it is incomplete, it's still really impressive. Kazuma came to Kyoto Jujutsu High while thinking. There was no other way. He owed Yutaheim a favor. Since Yutaheim hoped that he could spare some time to guide her students, Kazuma would naturally not refuse. Anyway, the Shibuya incident is about to happen, and the world of Jujutsu is about to change. Therefore, he can't teach for long. Kazuma-sensei, you are finally here. Don't show any mercy today, please encourage me as much as you can. Tadu immediately came over and said excitedly. Although, he was beaten badly by Kazuma in these days, but he has made great progress. Kazuma's mouth twitched, and he looked at the people ahead. Mai and the others were already standing in line, waiting for his teaching. They all looked expectant, waiting for Kazuma's instructions. After all, in the previous incident, Kazuma's strength had completely convinced them. Kazuma nodded and was about to start. But he found that the person he had been paying close attention to in recent days was missing from the crowd. Kazuma frowned and asked, "Why didn't Mekamaru come today?" After these words were spoken, Mai and others looked a little lost, as if they wanted to say something but hesitated. Miwa clenched her fists and lowered her head. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. Seeing this scene, even if they didn't say anything, Kazuma understood what had happened. It seems that after the investigation by Yutaheim and others, they have discovered that something is wrong with Mekamaru. In addition, after not finding Mekamaru in the underground secret room, Jujutsu High has labeled him a traitor. Kazuma was silent for a while. Then, he turned on his phone and found that today was October 30th, 2018. If he remembers correctly, the Shibuya incident will happen on the 31st. That is tomorrow. Then today is the day Mekamaru has an accident. Should he save him? Just then. Ding! A new and important mission choice has begun. Mission Option 1, fight with Sukuna using only taijutsu. Reward, Kakashi's Intimate Paradise. Mission Option 2, Sukuna has many eyes, randomly poke 2 of them, and act as pain. Reward, Domain Expansion, Black Flash Octagon Cage. Mission Option 3, stop Kenjaku's plan. Put Kenjaku in the prison realm. Reward, Reverse Curse Technique. Chapter 89, Mekamaru vs. Mahito. Suddenly, Kazuma's eyes widened. What? A domain? System, are you serious? Judging from the literal meaning, does it mean that after using this domain, he can pull the enemy inside an octagon cage to fight with him? Thinking about it this way, it seems pretty impressive. Kazuma instantly became interested. However, it is not an easy task to poke Sukuna's eyes. Kazuma suppressed the shock in his heart and then looked at options 1 and 2. First, only using taijutsu to fight against Sukuna carries a big risk. The combination of 8 inner gates and 100% Black Flash can unleash a terrifying power. With it, it should not be a problem for him to suppress Sukuna in terms of taijutsu. But once Sukuna gets angry, it will be hard to say whether he will use his domain or not. The most important thing is that the rewards are not too good. Kakashi's Intimate Paradise? That's it? Before arriving in this world, had he not read any books? In fact, he was even tired of these books as he had read too many of them. Besides, why does he need that thing when you already has Mei? Then there is the third option. Stop Kenjaku's trap. Kenjaku was the occupying ghetto's body in the Shibuya subway station. Even with the combined efforts of Jogo and the other disaster curses, they couldn't hold Gojo back for even a minute. The fake ghetto, played by Kenjaku, just called out Satoru and held Gojo in place. If this isn't a trap, what is it? Speaking of Kenjaku, he is really amazing. He is willing to go to extreme lengths all for his plans. But the reward for this mission was Reverse Curse Technique, which is not very useful to him. Now, he has Hashirama cells, and his basic recovery ability is no worse than the reverse curse technique. If the reward was a fully automatic reverse curse technique like that of Hikari, then he might consider it. So, in the final analysis, the reward is still too little. After some thought, Kazuma finally chose the second mission. After all, how can he not have his own domain after transmigrating to the world of Jujutsu Kaisen? It seems that this time, he will have to find a way to not only poke Sukuna's eyes, but also imitate pain and use Shinra Tensei and Chibaku Tensei. This time, the Shibuya incident will be even more lively with his participation. Kazuma-sensei? Kazuma? Mai raised her hand and waved it in front of Kazuma's eyes, bringing him back to reality. Kazuma asked, Mai, what's going on? Mai looked back at the classmates behind her, and hesitated for a while. Then she said, Mechamaru may not come back. After investigation, it is preliminarily determined that he is one of the traitors. Everyone felt very sad at this piece of news and, at the same time, they were very puzzled. No one would have thought that the approachable and friendly Mechamaru was actually a longtime spy inside Jujutsu High. The classmate they had been with day and night had now turned out to be a traitor. This was a huge blow to them. Kazuma asked, Mai, do you think the Mechamaru is a traitor? Suddenly, Mai's mouth curved slightly. She leaned closer to Kazuma and whispered playfully, whether he's a spy or not, Kazuma-sensei should know better than anyone else, right? After all, you can predict the future. Hearing this, Kazuma's face slightly froze, and then he immediately thought of her sister, Maki. No wonder the two sisters, who had never gotten along, had become closer than ever before during this period. It turns out that Maki has told her about his ability to predict the future that he had made up. At the same time, a big battle was breaking out at the dam on the outskirts of the forest. Boom! A huge mecha suddenly emerged from the water and roared to the sky. This was the final trump card of Mechamaru, the ultimate Mechamaru, the absolute form. Bang! The mecha raised its hand and fired a cannon at Mahito, blasting the entire bridge in two. However, a desperate voice came again. Ah ha ha ha! I didn't expect you had such a powerful hidden move. Do you want to use the mecha to kill me and spread the news? Then I will drag you out of this broken iron shell and turn you into my artificial cursed spirit. Mahito's forehead was covered in blood, and a crazy, sinister smile appeared at the corner of his lips. While running on the dam bridge, he dodged the destructive laser cannons fired by the frame controlled by the Mechamaru. Kenjaku, who was watching the battle from a distance, felt regretful. What a good helper, but it's a pity that he's a little too naughty. Since you didn't listen and now know my plan, then please just go and die. Inside the mecha, Mechamaru was gritting his teeth and controlling the machine to continuously attack Mahito, while constantly brainstorming. Damn it! The mecha has limited abilities to use, and there's also the curtain set up by Kenjaku in the outside world. The message simply couldn't get out. But no matter what method he uses, he must get in touch with Gojo and spread the news. Tell him about the Shibuya plan. Only in this way can Gojo come to protect him. He has to see them all again. And he will reunite with everyone in this healthy and true face. Thinking of this, Mechamaru's eyes became more determined, and he shouted. Charge for 2 years. Miracle Cannon. Boom! A powerful beam cannon fired at Mahito, and the entire dam was blasted through by this terrifying power. For a moment, the earth trembled, dust flew, and the lake water churned up huge waves. However, Mahito sneaked around to the side without anyone noticing, in a blind spot. He raised his huge right fist, which was growing larger rapidly, and swung it toward the face of the machine frame. Chapter 90, Unknown Interference. Bang! The huge mecha was knocked back by the punch, and the ground shook continuously. What a powerful force! Although Mechamaru in the cockpit was protected by a steel shell, he was still shaken by the blow, falling back and feeling dizzy. He gritted his teeth and forcibly controlled the mecha to stop its body. No, a protracted war is not good for me. The damage to my mecha will accumulate, and eventually, it will be scrapped. I must quickly end this battle. Charge for 5 years. Pigeon Viola. As Mechamaru's voice sounded, 5 turrets emerged on the shoulders of the mecha. Bang! 5 missiles, infused with a massive amounts of cursed energy, fired simultaneously, creating a dazzling light in the sky. These homing missiles carried the hope and faith in his heart. But they were not aimed at Mahito, they were targeting the chains that bound him, preventing his return to the embrace of Jujutsu High. Mahito transformed his cursed energy into wings. 2 wings sprouted from his back as he circled rapidly, dodging the missiles. TSK. So they have built-in tracking. I can feel the terrifying power inside them. If I get hit, I'll be seriously injured at least. In that case. Whoosh! Mahito abruptly changed direction, flying straight toward Mechamaru. His arm squirmed and morphed into an extremely sharp blade, glinting with a cold light. Let's see how you control those missiles once I cut your wires. Swish! The blade slashed down, severing the wires behind the mecha's head in a flash before sliding along its armored shell. Sizzle! Sparks erupted from the mecha's steel plating, and Mahito's strike left a deep groove. Lightning crackled as half of the mecha's arm lost control. However, inside the cockpit, Mechamaru didn't panic. He clenched his fists and punched Mahito, sending him flying backward. Then, a gleam of determination flashed in his eyes. Countless memories raced through his mind, finally settling on his comrades at Jujutsu High. I can win. I want to reunite with everyone in a healthy body. Reload the technique. Aha! Die! Blood trickled from the corners of Mechamaru's mouth. His eyes were bloodshot, and veins bulged on his forehead. With a roar, the mecha's fist transformed into a high-speed spinning drill, striking Mahito with full force. This attack is an all-out gamble. Mahito was blasted backward at high speed, his face covered in blood. Mahito laughed and said, "Ha ha ha. You actually pushed me this far. But this is where it ends." He suddenly opened his mouth, revealing 3 pairs of pale, miniature hands. The hands interlocked, forming an intricate hand seal. Domain expansion, embodiment of self-perfection. As Mahito spoke, an empty and oppressive space unfolded, enclosing Mechamaru within it. Mahito hovered cross-legged in the air above the domain, his long blue hair fluttering. Behind him, countless pale hands bloomed like a grotesque lotus flower. A massive hand extended, slamming Mechamaru's giant mecha into the ground. The mecha thrashed for a moment but then fell silent. Even its lights flickered out. The machine that had unleashed overwhelming power just seconds ago was now reduced to lifeless scrap metal. That's that. Mahito gazed indifferently at the immobile mecha before him. I'm sorry to have extinguished your last hope. As someone born from negative emotions, I can taste the despair in your heart right now. But don't bring dreams and hope into battle. It only makes you look pitiful. With hands behind his head, Mahito turned his back to Mechamaru, speaking like a victor addressing the defeated. Inside the dark cockpit, Mechamaru hung his head in silence. Is this a domain expansion? This is true, inescapable despair. But there is a domain. One passed down through generations, created specifically for the weak. A vision flickered in his mind, a woman with long blue hair. With a fierce gaze, she suddenly drew her sword. At this moment, Mechamaru's head snapped up, his bloodshot eyes widening. Blue flames of cursed energy surged around him. New shadow style, simple domain. Outside, Mahito's expression stiffened, surprise flashing in his eyes. Just as he turned, Mahito's pupils dilated as he looked down at his pierced body in disbelief. Blood spewed from his mouth as his body contorted and twisted, before exploding into a mist of crimson. Snap! His domain shattered. It worked! Mechamaru clenched his fists. Just one more step. If I can defeat Geto, I can escape. I can win. The faces of his friends at Jujutsu High resurfaced in his mind. But his joy was short-lived. Snap! Like a mirror shattering, his beautiful vision crumbled. Then, the cockpit barrier was blown apart. A red alarm blared. It was the sound of impending doom. Mahito's face twisted into a feral grin. His left arm morphed into a massive, high-speed spinning drill, aimed directly at Mechamaru's face. So, I didn't kill him completely? Mechamaru's pupils shrank in horror. His heart sank into the depths of despair as he glanced at the glowing red self-destruct button beside him. There's no other choice. I'm sorry. I won't get to see you all again. Boom! The drill tore through the cockpit's defenses, closing in. Mechamaru's gaze turned resolute. With a final roar, he slammed his palm toward the button. Come on! Mechamaru! Suddenly, a pair of massive hands appeared, crushing Mahito's drill in an instant. At the same time, they halted Mechamaru's hand, preventing him from pressing the button. Outside, Kenjaku stood with his hands in his pockets, while slightly raising his eyebrows. Huh? Am I seeing things? I thought I saw a flash of yellow just now. That wraps up this part of What If Ninja in Jujutsu Kaisen. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.